Well, now, Peter, let's turn to Europe, shall we? Or we shouldn't say turn to Europe, turn to the continent of Europe.
Including us, I may say.
Well, including us as well.
Yes,
okay,
indeed.
fine. And see what the overall pattern is.
Because what I want to show you is how there's been a rebuff to nearly every government in Europe between the time the general election in each of these countries and now, with one single exception so far. Just untie the balloons and let them fly up in the air in a moment. Just get down there so we can see them. Here we are, the balloons representing, this time, representing the governing parties in each of these countries. We're going to see how those governing parties have moved since their most recent general election. There they are, just we'll get them in a straight line. That's it. Right, thank you. Right. The government fortunes right the way across Europe so far. We have quite a few of them in now. There's still a few more exit polls and this, that and the other to come and results from these countries. So let's start over here now with Denmark. There is Paul, elected in March 98. That's just over a year ago. Oh, the flame's gone out. He's going down. Down he goes. He's dropped a whole 18%. Tough economic stringency in Denmark, an unpopular prime minister, an unpopular government. Here's what we thought was popular government in this country. May 97 he was elected. Whoops, flame's gone out. Down goes the balloon, a whole 15%. That is the change in Labour's share of the vote since the last general election. Now, the Germans, what's going to happen to Gerhard Schröder? Here he is, elected only 9 months ago. It's SPD, oh dear, he's going down to, how far? 10% down. Big success for the Christian Democrats in the European elections in Germany as compared with the general election, all the time the most recent general election. Here we now have the Netherlands. Wim Kok, who of course had a pretty good, tough time with his coalition partners, Democratic 66 the other day, so he's dropping down 9% since the last general election. Here is Kostas Samitis, the socialist prime minister in Greece. He's going down too since his last general election, down by 8%. Austria, there's Viktor Klima, the Chancellor of Austria. He's had an election about a year and a half ago. He's down 6% since then. What about the French? Lionel Jospin, having trouble with the economy in France. Things are looking up, I thought, with the economy in France. That's not what most people think, obviously, down by 6%. And now here's the Finns. There's Paavo Lipponen, the Prime Minister of Finland, elected just only 3 months ago. He's gone down too, not very far, this one, by 5%. Now, what about the Portuguese? The only ones who might just do a little bit better than the others, Antonio Guterres. Ah, yes, she's flaring up to 3% improvement on that Social Democrats position since the last election in Portugal. So, David, there it is, a pretty bleak picture for all the governments so far, except Portugal.
Peter, thanks so much. Well, let's go to one of those. Let's go to Finland, because Finland's been rather in the news, what with President Ahtisaari negotiating the agreement in Belgrade, and then they're taking over the presidency on July the 1st of the European Union. So let's go to Finland and join Zena Badawi. Oh, here's the graphic just to show, by the way, the figures before we go there. That's the result on a basis of a forecast, exit polls. You see the ruling party down 5%, centre-right up 6, up 4, centre-alliance up 6, centre-right up 4. But as Peter was saying, that's a smaller fall than any of the other governments in the European Union. So we join Zena Badawi.
Well, here we are in the old heart of Helsinki in a famous cafe frequented by the likes of Sibelius, and I'm joined now by two distinguished Finns. First of all, by Olli Kivenen, who's a leading commentator and journalist on Finland's most influential newspaper, and by Astrid Thors, an MEP for the Swedish People's Party, and congratulations because you've retained your seat. Yeah. First of all, Olli Kivenen, all the results of Finland are in. There are only 16 seats. What do the results tell us? Is there a trend of a shift from left to right here?
Absolutely, yes. In Helsinki there was a clear swing to the right because especially the Social Democrats made the most catastrophic result ever. They dropped to 18% of the vote.
And that's the Social Democratic Party, which is the Prime Minister's party.
Prime Minister's party, yes, and also the Left Union, the Left Alliance lost, and the total share of the left parties was 26%, which is really a major catastrophe for them.
And Astrid Thors, Finland also followed the rest of the European Union with this very low turnout, 30%, the lowest ever in this country. Were you, as a committed Europhile, very disappointed by that?
Of course, one should be not only disappointed, but very worried. I think we have, in fact, regional differences. That you could say that the part of Finland which voted for membership in the European Union also had a higher turnout, but that part that did not vote in favor now did leave at home, and my worst predictions, like that the temperature would be as high as the turnout in the votes, nearly got through. And I think, well, as they discussed in UK, of course, one thing is that we had the parliamentary elections in March, so they were quite close, and we have so many elections ahead also made people tired. And of course, everybody knew that the summer Sunday is not the best time for elections in Finland.
So a change there would help. But Olli Kivinen, is there also perhaps the fact that the Finns feel that they can't actually gain very much from the European Union? I mean, it's a very prosperous country. I see everybody here has got a mobile telephone. You use more mobile phones than anybody else in the world, and the internet. Is it a case of the Finns think, oh, we're doing fine, we don't need the EU?
Yes, they don't think that way, no. But for some odd reason, this quiet is centered on the parliament for some odd reason. The marvelous weather, of course, was one thing, but the people really feel this distant. It doesn't really give them any dividend of any sort. It doesn't really deliver. And also these here, because of the long distances, the fiddle with the travel money, travel expenses is a major issue. People feel cheated.
As for tours, Finland, though, only has 16 MEPs, and although the country assumes the presidency in 2 weeks' time, can it realistically do very much to try to correct the corruption that Olli Kivinen was talking about?
I think Olli Kivinen is right in saying that as we did not make changes in the travel allowance systems and the rest of the remuneration, that was a prediction for a long turnout. So, and we asked for solidarity from the other member states to say, please, this will be very bad.
What can you do from now on, very briefly?
Well, I hope that during the Finnish presidency there will be sympathetic against that we must have a reform, that this is really crucial for the reputation of the European Parliament.
Astrid Tours and Olli Kivinen, thank you both very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Zainab Badawi there in Helsinki. We've got an interesting result just before we go to Germany, which I will in a moment, which is the UK Independence Party in Tainbridge, coming second to the Conservatives, 9,900 for the Conservatives, UK Independence Party 3,900, Labour 3,800. There's the share of the vote, and the change since the last election, which of course the UK Independence Party wasn't there at the last election. UK Independence Party, which wishes to pull out of Europe, 13.5%. Tony King, how has the UK Independence Party been doing as a whole?
Oh, it's really doing very well for a party that scarcely existed until this election, though it did fight the last one in a nominal kind of way. We've had the result in from the northeast. They got 8.8% of the vote in the northeast. One voter in 12, rather more than that, actually voted for UKIP, as we're taught to call it. And our forecast is that over the country as a whole, they probably will get 7% of the vote, just ahead of the Greens on 6%. And it's worth noting that we have these bars that show others, but this is an election where not only are the others doing very well, it looks as though they'll poll better than the Liberal Democrats, but where we need really to disaggregate them and look very carefully at how that other vote is composed. The pro-European Conservatives, by the way, look as though they're going absolutely nowhere.
Okay, thanks very much. Let's just have a reminder of how Germany is going, and then we'll go to Berlin. Here are the figures, the forecast figures. The SPD 31%, the CDU and CSU, the centre-right at 49%, the Greens on 7%, Free Democrats on 3%, and the change on the election last autumn, September 98, 10% down the SPD, 14% up for the centre-right parties, and the Greens staying the same, Free Democrats falling a bit. Let's join Justin Webb, who's in Berlin. Justin.
Yes, welcome back to Berlin. I'm joined by two of those two people who were on one of Peter Snow's balloons, actually, who've been sinking on one of those balloons, both of them members of the parties that make up the governing coalition here. Frieda Otto-Wolff, who has been an MEP in the Green Party and is hoping to become an MEP again, but he doesn't know yet whether he's been re-elected, and Heike Liesfeld of the SPD. Let me start with you, first of all, Frieda Otto-Wolff. It was the war, wasn't it, that did the most damage to your support? That is a fact.
Well, that's for sure. We have a problem of credibility because of the easy acceptance of the NATO war by large parts of our leadership, and a number of rank and file and also part of the electorate has not accepted this.
Has it done so much damage to your party that you are going to have to leave the coalition, that it puts your place in the government of this country in jeopardy?
Well, I think there is a clear majority in the party leadership and in the group in Parliament not to do this. But in fact, we are in a situation where we have to rethink and to reformulate the very basis of this coalition.
But for the time being, though, you soldier on.
I think there is no immediate danger of breaking.
Heike Liesveld, SPD, why the drop? Why has Gerhard Schröder not been able to maintain the levels of support which saw him elected as Chancellor less than a year ago?
Well, I think the domestic problems, social welfare, pension, 630 mark, have been so severe that most of the people were angry about even 6 months government, so he lost.
And it's interesting, isn't it, this evening he has been saying here that yes, he accepts that there was a message that came from this result for him.
Yeah, well, the problem will be whether he will try to have SPD become a new Labour, or whether he will accept that we are Social Democrats.
So you're saying that the message that he believes he has been given is that actually he should go in the direction Mr. Blair wants him to go, radical structural reforms of the German economy, and have those reforms soon. Yeah. Is that going to happen, do you think?
Well, I don't think so, and I would also object to the term of reforms, because if you just think neoliberal changes and deregulation to be reform, you have a very limited vision of the kind of real, sustainable and social and ecological reforms that are overdue.
But when Mr. Schröder himself seems to suggest that that is the message that he has got, you're saying that he's wrong?
I think he's wrong. I think Social Democrats and Greens had great difficulty in mobilizing large parts of the electorate with a turnout as low as never before in German history. And if they go down this Blairite path, they will have even more difficulty to mobilize.
To what extent can, I mean, plainly this has been about domestic issues in Germany, there's no question about that, everyone believes that. To what extent do you believe, though, that the fault lies with domestic parliaments here in Germany, perhaps around, and domestic governments, perhaps around the European Union, that people have not grasped the importance of the European Parliament itself as an institution?
No, unfortunately not, and I think the greatest mistake is a national parliament, because they think themselves so important, but if you look at regulations or initiatives that are coming from European Parliament, simply can forget national parliament. Even the Chamber of the States, the German states is more active in European policy, and I think the regions have to a great extent understood what Europe means, but not.
Thank you, Frida. I have to stop you there. Thank you very much. That is it for the moment from Berlin. Back to the studio in London.
Where our news is from Wales, Islwyn, Plaid Cymru in these elections have taken it from Labour. They're the raw figures. There's the share of the vote, Plaid Cymru on 40%, and compared with the 1997 general election, Labour down 34% and Plaid Cymru up 33%. Remember, as always, the health warning that the turnout is very much lower. And the same thing has happened, or the same effect in Conwy. And we'll just have a look at that. Plaid Cymru again, 5,351, Labour 4,400. The Conservatives quite close in third place, the Liberal Democrats at 3,000, so fairly close run thing all the way through. Those are the share figures. Plaid Cymru on 29, and the change. Plaid Cymru up 22, Labour down 11, and the Liberal Democrats down 14 points. And they were won at the Assembly, those seats, until those two seats were won by Plaid Cymru at the Assembly. So let's go now and rejoin Michael Crick, who we last saw on the Eurostar. He did eventually arrive at his destination in Paris, and he's been talking to people tonight on the Champs-Élysées. Michael.
On the Champs-Élysées, there was no more sign of election in France today than there had been in Britain last Thursday. It was a typical Paris Sunday afternoon. Here at the very heart of Paris, what do they think of the European Parliament? It shouldn't be too difficult to find some French voices to ask. Excuse me, are you French? No. You're not, right. Excuse me, are you French? No. Right. Excuse me, are you French? No? Are you French? And so it continued. So we made do with some Swedes among the newer members of the European Union. What do you think of the European Parliament?
I think it's corrupt, it's a lot of ludicrous, but I voted for a lady I think that could be a bit sensible to put things in order.
You're from Finland?
Yes, sir.
Isn't it a bit extravagant, the European Parliament? How do the Finns feel about that? Or maybe this happens in Finland as well?
Well, I think to be honest, I think the number of people that are working there is not that tremendous.
So it's just as bad in Finland, is it?
Well, I would say that I wouldn't say that it's as bad. It's if you think of the number of the people, they are quite thinly organized after all, and I think they are under quite a bit of workload.
At last, some French out for a Sunday afternoon rollerblade. Some people in Britain think it's all too extravagant and a waste of time. The European Parliament. No?
I think if you want to create something in Europe, we need it. It's very important. I think it's getting more and more power. I think it's very important.
And you think it should be given more power?
Yes, it's getting more and more power, but I think, yes, it's a good thing.
What do you think of the record of the European Parliament? Does it deserve more powers?
I would say it does not.
Why not?
I like our powers to be with the British government. That's the way I feel personally.
What do you think about the European Parliament?
Well, I'm quite against it actually.
Why?
I think that if England go into Europe, we might sort of lose a lot of our identity and especially our money, and I think that's a bad thing.
So it was left to the British, we found, to offer the less optimistic, more hostile view. That's a surprise.
So the results from France, let's just have a look at that. The overall picture is that the socialists in government, Jospin's government, is down on the general election, but the Gaullists' RPR share of the vote is the lowest for 40 years. The National Front, who are divided, split, their vote's down. The Greens have made big gains. Daniel Cohn-Bendit, who was an MEP in Germany and is now an MEP in France, the first to cross countries, the famous leader of the '68 protests, he's got in on the result of that 12% vote for the Greens. There are the figures then. Socialists 21, the centre-right 21, National Front at 8, the Communists at 8. And the antis, the anti-European unions, 11%, comparable with our UK Independence Party. I mean, to be compared with them, rather, I should say. And there's the change since the election of June 7. Centre-right well down, National Front down, and the Greens well up. So there's the French picture. Now we join Catherine Gilliardi, who's in Paris. Catherine, good evening.
Good evening.
Hello. Now tell me, what do you think has been happening in Paris, and how do you compare it with what's been going on in Germany and what's been going on in Britain?
Well, I think the big difference is that the left wing here seems to have made a good score, and that's different as we've seen in Britain. And as well, the smaller parties seem to have got a better score than expected. I have to point out as well that we have a Hunters party that got 5%, well, expected to get 5% of the vote. So as you say,
a Hunters party?
Hunters party, yes.
What do they stand for?
Well, for the right of hunters and actually fishermen as well.
Okay. and what, just one other thing before, I know you've got some guests with you to talk to, but you know, there seems to be a lot of feeling in Britain that the European Parliament is not something worth voting for. People don't accept that it's a real force in their lives. In Germany, it used to be the view that it was terribly important. What is the French view about the European Parliament?
Well, if you look at the turnout, which is 48%, it doesn't seem for the French to be an important issue. Here, the issue was more to give a mandate to this or that party than to actually talk about European issues. French politicians have made this time an effort to put important candidates, well-known candidates on the European list, but still it didn't attract French interest to this poll. So the European Parliament, despite its greater powers, doesn't draw much interest here.
So who do you have with you this evening in Paris?
So we have Mrs. Pervence Perez, who is the head of the French Socialist MEPs. We have Mrs. Laure Schnetter from an independent ecologist movement. And we have academic Christian Lequen from Paris-based Center for International Studies. And I want to ask you, Mr. Lequen, Is there in France, can we say now there is a divide between Eurosceptic and pro-European with this high score for this former RPA Charles Pasqua list?
Well, I think first of all, if we take the results and try to divide it between the pro and the anti, we have about 50-50, which is very close from the referendum we had for the Maastricht Treaty some years ago. What strikes me is that the governmental party, the socialist, doesn't do bad at all if we compare to the Labour in Great Britain or to the SPD in Germany. But what is more interesting is that, as you said, a list like the list of Mr. Pasqua, which is a list which defines itself outside, let's say, the so-called bigs, and who insist on the fact that they fight on European issues, of course, let's say, a certain model of Europe, which is the Europe of the nation state. But we have exactly the same with the ecologists, Cohn-Bendit list, who said that they are in favor of a certain Europe, federal Europe. Those lists got very good scores today. So when we say that European elections are always concentrated on domestic issues, I don't think it's true. Okay. European issues matter.
Mrs. Beres, what do you think? Do you think that you haven't managed to bring interest on this campaign, that it was a pretty dull campaign in France and the French gave you a good score, but still they stayed at home mostly?
No, I think we are very, very pleased with the score we did today. I think it's the first time the socialist list is in head in these elections. It's the first time that a party goes to a part-time election 2 years after being in power and having a so good result. So for us it's a real success. I mean, our first aim was to be in head of the score tonight, and this is obviously the result. We are 10 points ahead of the next list, which is obviously a very big success for François Hollande.
Okay. Do you think that, I mean, you're talking a lot about domestic problem,
no,
and I'll just put a question to Mrs. Schnetter. Do you think that the Greens, who now are going to be more numerous in the European Parliament, or at least they're having a great score here in France, do you think they will change something in Europe?
Well, I hope, but the result isn't a clear success of the ecology scores. And I think that in '89, I was a founding member of the Greens, and with our strategy of independence with Antoine Lechner and other peoples, we brought the Greens at the time at more than 10% of the vote, with 9 deputies elected at the European Parliament. And nevertheless, even if so, the score of the Greens is good this year and a success.
Yes,
it's not as good as it was in '89 when we were all united.
Are you happy there are more ecologists? Are you happy there are more ecologists in the European Parliament?
I'm happy there is more ecologists if they talk and act about ecology. The big trouble with Madame Voynet, our Minister of Environment, is that she spends half of her political energy to know not about ecology, but where is the real left within the left, and also she is selling to the French constituency, ecological constituency in this country, poor compromises about ecological issues. I'm going to give you some examples.
I'm sorry, we don't have time for this. It's very interesting.
It would be very funny if I could give you even one example.
Okay, I just want to ask one more question to Mrs. Beres. Do you think that the corruption scandal that occurred this year with the sacking of the Commission and Edith Cresson, part of the French Socialist Party, was really put on the light, and people were saying that she was cause of this corruption? Do you think that this has brought the fact that far less French people have voted this year for European elections?
No, obviously not. The question of the resign of the Commission was not in the theme in this campaign, because the fact to try to sack Edith Cresson, I think it was the right tried to have this case as a demonstration that the socialists shouldn't be able to deal with public money. And they failed in this demonstration because we had this report from this expert committee who really demonstrated that there was a real problem in the administration of the Commission and not especially on Edith Crescent's case. I think the main issue is to have a real debate on European issue during this campaign. On the Maastricht Treaty, we had a real good turn-up in the election. In this case, we had a real program, but on the other side, there was no real program to discuss.
Okay,
so we couldn't have the campaign.
Thank you, Mrs. Beres. Thank you to all the guests for joining us tonight.
Catherine, thank you very much indeed. Catherine Gigliardi there in Paris. Let's have a reminder now about how things are looking here in Britain, Peter.
Taking a brisk look at the scene so far then, we'll just bring our map forward, and we have a stack of seats there. The North East, the only result declared so far, the whole region declared, 3 went down to Labour, of course, and just 1 for the Conservatives in the North East. That's the smallest of all the regions. We do now have forecasts, though, as you can see here, from 5 other regions. Yorkshire and Humber there, Yorkshire and Humber. Here is the East Midlands, here's the West Midlands, there is Wales. Look at 2 Plaid Cymru seats, and look at this chap on top here. That is the United Kingdom Independence Party forecast to win a seat in the southwest. Turn it on its side so we can see it in more detail. There we are. Now, therefore, first of all, is the northeast, with Labour taking the lion's share of the seats. The forecast here, and all these are forecasts. Yorkshire and Humber side, there's 3 Conservative seats, 3 Labour seats, and 1 for the Liberal Democrats we're forecasting. 2 Plaid Cymru in Wales and 2 Labour, with the Tories taking 1. That's what we're forecasting. In the East Midlands, we're giving the Liberal Democrats 1 in our forecast at the moment. West Midlands, the Tories taking the lion's share of the seats, with Labour taking only 3 and the Liberal Democrats 1. And down here in the southwest, the Tories taking 4 seats in the south. A real comeback by the Tories now in the areas of their real strength, of course. In a general election, the Tories need to win most of the seats in the Midlands. So you can see they're really big comeback. Of course, again, turnout, terrible turnout. How representative is this of what people would really do in a general election? There's Labour with 1 seat there. And here's the United Kingdom Independence Party forecast to take the 7th seat in the southwest. David.
Peter, thanks very much. Well, we hope to have the Yorkshire and the Humber result in a moment coming through. That rather curious declaration where you get all the raw figures and then you get the actual allocation of those seats. In the northwest, Carol Walker's there. I don't know whether she's listening to us, but Carol, hi. How are things going there? Carol, how are things going in the northwest?
We're getting pretty close to the results. We're getting pretty close to having the overall results for the northwest. And it looks as though we could be seeing 5 MEPs for the Tories, 4 for Labour and 1 for the Lib Dems. I have to say that within the last few minutes, when the Tories' number of votes overtook that of Labour, there was a big cheer from the Tory supporters there. And I've got with me Nigel Evans, the Constitutional Affairs spokesman for the Conservatives, Phil Woolas, who's been coordinating Labour's campaign here in the northwest, and Andrew Stunnell from the Liberal Democrats. Nigel Evans, you've exceeded most of your own expectations in this area, but it's very much to do with the way the turnout has played out.
Well, I think it's got a lot to do with the fact that the Conservatives fought a very successful campaign and that we have exceeded our expectations. The Conservative percentage of the vote is greater than that of the Labour Party's percentage of the vote, and the Liberal Democrat vote has collapsed everywhere. And therefore, we're obviously delighted, but it endorses William Hague's message that we want to be in Europe and not run by Europe, and that the Labour Party's message just simply did not get through, or people did not like their message.
But hasn't much of the Conservative campaign focusing on the problems of fraud, being opposed to the single currency, backfired? I understand that we might be coming to the declaration. Now, it's not quite underway just yet. Don't you think that that may have been in some way responsible for the low turnout?
No, the fact is that there is apathy amongst the electorate as far as Europe is concerned generally, but also, of course, there is the new voting system, and people did not like the closed list system whatsoever. They felt that it was taking power away from the people and giving it to the political parties. The House of Lords told the Labour Party 5 times that they ought not to go ahead with this, but Tony Blair in his arrogance wouldn't listen to what the House of Lords said. They foisted this electoral system upon the public, and they've spoken loudly on Thursday, and this evening we can see the results.
Okay, Phil Woolas, the electorate didn't like this closed list system, and certainly if you look at the sort of turnout in your strongholds, it hasn't played out very well. It's played out very badly for Labour, hasn't it?
I think it's true. If you look at the turnout in Labour's areas, in our strong areas, it's not as high. It's higher in the Conservative areas, as has been said. I don't think it's got anything to do with the voting system. I knew when I came here tonight that Labour would lose seats. This is a new system that we've introduced.
But you didn't expect to lose as many as it looks as though you have lost here in the northwest.
Well, if you look at the votes of the two major parties, there's a few thousand between them across the region.
Conservatives gained 15
well,
seats throughout
yes,
the
but
northwest.
if you, on a 22% turnout, Nigel, if you think this is good news, then you're in for a shock in the long run.
Well, the fact is the campaign has been a disaster for the Labour Party.
Well, I think the Labour voters, who are in the majority, are content with the situation, with the national government, with the way things are going, and that's why they haven't come out to vote.
If I can just bring in Andrew Stunnell here for the Liberal Democrats, because the Liberal Democrats do actually control the council here in Liverpool.
Indeed.
Yet you don't seem to have picked up in these European elections from the lack of enthusiasm amongst Labour voters.
Well, what we've done is increase our share of the vote compared to the last European elections, and we're very pleased about that in the Northwest. We've got our first Euro MP elected here in the Northwest, a strong voice in Brussels, exactly what we aimed to do at the start of the campaign. And of course, for us, Europe is a very significant issue, but unfortunately for so many of the electors, it hasn't been. And 19% turnout, I think, across the Northwest is a disappointment. But for us as Liberal Democrats, we're very happy to see ourselves with a representative in Brussels able to speak up strongly for the Northwest.
If you look at Liverpool, I mean, this is an area which is getting some £650 million in aid from the EU, and yet people seem to feel that the European Parliament has absolutely nothing to do with them.
Well, I think the constituency with the record low turnout in the European elections, which was Liverpool-Riverside, also contributed a record low turnout in the general election. And I think that there is a disenchantment with politics in some parts of the Northwest, perhaps particularly in the inner urban areas, and it's a challenge to politicians of all parties to show how important it is for people to take a part in the decision-making process.
Phil Willis, we're still waiting for the declaration. We're expecting it fairly shortly. But that is a problem, isn't it? I mean, Labour came to power as this pro-European party, but you haven't seemed to have fired up your own supporters in areas like this.
But it is very difficult to, I agree with what's just been said, it's very difficult to mobilise voters when generally they feel happy with the economic and political situation, which is
I don't think we can let them.
This is one of the most ludicrous arguments to say that people are content, therefore they stand.
Well, it's an argument, Nigel, that you used for 15 years.
Phil, I cannot
How
believe,
else do you
I can't believe that
the
people...
higher turnout in the Conservative seats?
But I cannot believe that because our campaign was more successful, it got across to the electorate, and it wasn't just Conservative voters coming across. It was also Labour voters, Liberal Democrat voters coming out and voting for the Conservatives.
Okay, well, I think, gentlemen, we'll probably have to agree to differ from that. The voters are either content or they simply couldn't be bothered.
Not content with Labour.
We are expecting the result very shortly, but for now, David, back to you in the studio.
Well, thank you. We're waiting also for the result from Leeds, for Yorkshire and the Humber, and they're all marching about there as though they're about to get it. Those are the candidates who've just, I suspect, been told what the result is, but we'll keep the pictures there. Tony King, do you have any more points you want to add about the results so far and what we've been hearing?
Well, those forecasts that Peter Snow had up a few moments ago are absolutely amazing, including in some areas where Labour outpolled the Conservatives by 2-1 at the last general election. It now looks as though the Conservatives will get as many MEPs or even more than the Labour Party. Whatever else we're going to infer from this evening, it is quite clear that Tony Blair's honeymoon with the voters, and probably with many people in the Labour Party, is over.
What about the Liberal Democrats? Because they've lost 26 out of the 46 constituencies they had at in Westminster, and they're down to 9, I think, Euro seats. 2 fewer than they'd have got, or 3 fewer, 2 fewer than they'd have got under PR 94.
Yes, they've not done very well. Remember that...
I mean, do you think it's the same argument for the Liberal Democrats as for Labour? They got attached to Labour and people treat them the same?
I think there is a bit of a problem about that. I think this is going to ignite a controversy within the Liberal Democrat Party about what its future relationship with Labour ought to be. When Labour goes up, the Lib Dems go up. When Labour goes down, it seems that the Lib Dems go down as well.
Alison, what do you make of it?
Well, the one point to note with the Liberal Democrats is that the survey evidence suggests that there's a proportion of people who would happily vote Liberal Democrat in a general election, but are not voting it in the European elections. And the one thing that makes that group quite distinctive is that they're very, very anti the single currency. So that actually suggests that the Liberal Democrat stance on that issue is losing them support in some key areas.
So you think the single currency, contrary to what they were claiming, may be the determining factor in the Liberal Democrat result?
Precisely. If we looked at the result earlier on, where the real beneficiaries from a Liberal Democrat loss with the UK Independence Party, that would bear that out.
Do you want to comment on that?
Well, it doesn't stand up because we did not have a campaign, a proper campaign on the single currency. And until we get a proper campaign and have a referendum, then I don't believe you're entitled to draw inferences of that kind. Plus the fact, if I may take Tony King on for a moment, we've just had local government elections of which Liberal Democrats got 27%. That hardly suggests that association with Labour was something which damaged them when it came to local government. Here we're dealing with a 25% turnout in a campaign which everyone agrees was dominated by a Conservative Party which ran as the party opposed to Europe.
But still, this was a national election, and on local election night, the Liberal Democrat representative Simon Hughes was making a great deal of the fact that the Liberal Democrats were doing well precisely because these were local elections. This is a national election, and the Liberal Democrats clearly aren't doing well.
Michael Ankrom.
They're not, well, if I may deal with the point, they're not doing as well as we would like. But remember, this is on a 25% turnout, a lot less than in the local government.
Michael Ankrom.
The point, though, surely is, I mean, that the Conservatives, this is a significant result for the Conservatives, and I think Tony King, who chided me 4 weeks ago on a similar programme on the local elections when I said that was a significant result, would agree that this is a significant result. But you see, if Ming was right, and if Margaret was right, that we only won because we took an extreme position, we wouldn't see the UKIP vote coming up as we are. We found throughout...
United Kingdom Independence Party.
Yes, we found throughout this campaign... We found... Well, just let me answer, I'll let you answer. We found throughout this campaign people coming to us who were Labour voters and Liberal voters saying they were unhappy with their party's position on Europe. They were going to support us because they thought we had a broad and a positive approach to Europe, which was in tune with the instincts of the British people, and I think that has been reflected in the vote tonight. It's a significant vote. This is a significant result. We're going to build on it. I've always predicted it would take us time to achieve our recovery and to win the next election. This is another significant step forward.
What about losing to the UK Independence Party, 7%?
But I think that is an indication that there are people, and we've met them during the campaign, who do believe we should leave Europe. Now, we have always talked about being in Europe,
and there's no home for them in the present setup. Let's go to Leeds, where I think we're just about to get the Yorkshire and Humber result. It has 7 seats, Yorkshire and Humber, and if it was 1994 euros, 4 would be Labour, 2 Conservative and 1 Liberal Democrat.
Right, thank you. European parliamentary election, Yorkshire and the Humber region, declaration of result of poll. I, Paul Rogerson, Regional Returning Officer for the European parliamentary election in the region of Yorkshire and the Humber, hereby declare that the number of votes cast for each party is as follows. Alternative Labour list supporting Left Alliance, 9,554. British National Party, 8,911. Conservative Party, 272,653. Green Party, 42,604. Labour Party, 233,024. Liberal Democrats, 107,168. Natural Law Party, 1,604. Pro-Euro Conservative Party, 8,075. Socialist Labour Party, 7,650. UK Independence Party, 52,824. The number of votes rejected is 1,849. I therefore declare that the following candidates have been duly elected for the region of Yorkshire and the Humber. Edward Macmillan Scott, Conservative Party. Linda McAvan, Labour Party. Timothy Kirkhope, Conservative Party. David Bowe, Labour Party. Diana Paulette Wallace, Liberal Democrats. Robert Goodwill, Conservative Party. Richard Corbett, Labour Party. Mr. Macmillan Scott.
how Yorkshire and the Humber region works out. Edward Macmillan Scott is the Conservative leader in Europe, and the overall picture: 3 Labour, 3 Conservative, 1 Liberal Democrat. And the UK Independence Party beating the Greens at 52,000 against 42,000 for the Greens. Do you want to comment on that result?
Yes, I think it's fascinating. At the last general election, the Labour Party got 52% of the vote in Yorkshire and Humberside. The Conservatives got 28%, and now the Conservatives are leading the Labour Party in what should normally be a Labour stronghold. We can look at the explanation for this at any length, and we probably will. But this is, whatever else it is, a very bad night for the Labour Party indeed.
Margaret.
I can't disagree with that. We're very unhappy about such a result. I repeat, I think the reasons for it are in the campaign that was fought by the Conservatives, and I think that will come back to haunt them. But tonight, it's not good for us.
All right, we go to Liverpool. I think we have the Northwest region declaring.
Candidates indicated previously just a few minutes ago.
There are 10 seats in the Northwest, and if the election had been fought under PR in 1994, at those Euro elections, it would have turned out as 6 Labour, 3 Conservatives, 1 Liberal Democrat. Turnout under 20% in the Northwest, and Labour, according to our figures, just over 20% down on the general election vote, and the Conservatives 7% up.
I'm waiting for technology. We'll allow the technology to catch up. I, Charles Edward Lasham, being the Regional Returning Officer for the North West European Parliamentary Constituency, hereby declare that the votes cast for each of the political parties and individual candidates on the list are as follows. British National Party, 13,587 votes. Conservative Party, 360,027 votes. The Green Party, 56,828 votes. Labour Party, 350,511 votes. Liberal Democratic Party, 119,376 votes. The Liberal Party, 22,640 votes. Natural Law Party, 2,114 votes. Pro-Euro Conservative Party, 9,816 votes. Socialist Labour Party, 11,338 votes. The UK Independence Party, 66,779 votes. Weekly Worker, 878 votes. David Oswald Braid, 2,251 votes. Douglas Fairkin Flood, 1,049 votes. There were 2,241 rejected papers. And I hereby declare that the following candidates have been elected for the North West region. William Richard Fletcher Vane Inglewood, Conservative Party. The second seat is Arlene McCarthy from the Labour Party. Third, Robert Atkins, Conservative Party. Fourth, Gary Titley, Labour Party. Fifth, David Anthony Gerald Sundberg, Conservative Party. The sixth, Chris Davis, Liberal Democrats. The seventh, Terry Wynne, Labour Party. The 8th, Densmore Ronald Dover, Conservative Party. And the 9th, Brian Simpson, Labour Party. The 10th seat, Jacqueline Foster from the Conservative Party.
So I make that 5 Conservative, 4 Labour and 1 Liberal Democrat in the northwest. And I think we can now go to the southwest, to Yeovil, which is the centre of the regional count there, and see what's happened there, particularly what's happened to the Liberal Democrats. Here they go.
We'll give the total votes for each party in the percentage first, then the names of the 7 successful candidates. So, British National Party, 9,752 votes, 0.94%. Conservative Party, 434,645 votes, 41.7%. The Green Party, 86,630 votes, 8.31%. The Labour Party, 188,362 votes, 18.07%. Liberal Democrats, 171,498 votes, 16.45%. Liberal Party, 21,645 votes, 2.08%. Natural Law, 1,968 votes, 0.19%. Pro-Euro Conservative Party, 11,134 votes, 1.07%. Socialist Labour Party, 5,741 votes, 0.55%. UK Independence Party, 111,012 votes, 10.65%. There were a total of 1,892 votes rejected throughout the region. The following 7 people are then elected to the European Parliament to represent the South-West region. Caroline Francis Jackson, Conservative Party. Giles Brian Chichester, Conservative Party. James Glyn Ford, Labour Party. Graham Watson, Liberal Democrats. Alexander Daniel Allen Stockton, Conservative Party. Michael John Holmes, UK Independence Party. Neil Quentin Gordon Parish, Conservative Party. All that I have left to say is to say thank you to all my colleagues at South Somerset District Council for the help over the past few months, and to invite the representative from each party to speak.
Well, Margaret Beckett, Ming Campbell, was saying that this was a disastrous night for Labour. How does it look to you for the Liberal Democrats?
Well, that's disappointing there, because it means we've lost Robin Teverson, who is an MEP of great distinction. He has been, if you like, a casualty of proportional representation, but we can't make any complaint about that.
But your own vote is down 16% in the southwest.
Yes, that's deeply disappointing, but I don't offer any explanation other than the one I've been offering all night, which is that on 25% of the poll, and I don't think these are significant, particularly when you have regard to the local government elections of only 4 weeks ago. And I think the Conservatives really, in a sense, have got the genie out of the bottle, which may explain why the UK Independence Party is doing so well in some places as well. We're now, I think, coming to a point of British politics in which there will be a very strong anti-European flavour to our politics. I think that's very much against the interests of the country, but I believe it's against the interests of the Conservative Party as well, because there are plenty of people in the Conservative Party, and quite a lot on the benches, the back benches of the Conservative Party in the House of Commons, who are not sympathetic to the kind of political stance that William Hague has taken up for this election.
Okay. Peter Snow.
David, here's that sensational result from the southwest in a bit more detail. Here we have the 51 counts in the southwest. They've all declared there with the constituency totals. As you can see, an awful lot of blue there because each one of their constituencies found a Conservative majority. Here is the vote total in the southwest then. Nearly 500,000 the Tories, 188,000 Labour, way behind. There's the Liberal Democrats in third place there, and 246,000 the others. Now, the forecast share, the share that represents, 42% Conservatives, 18% Labour, 16% Liberal Democrats, 24% the others, and that share, of course, drives the seats. And just look back, before we look at the seats, at the story of the South-West in a number of elections. The European elections, with the Liberal Democrats and the Tories almost neck and neck up there, Then the Liberal Democrats dropping down at the general election to 31%, the Tories up at 36% in the lead in the general election, 26% Labour, and now look what's happened. Here we have the result tonight with the Tories up on 42%. Just look at that blue line shooting up there. Here's Labour ending up just ahead of the Liberal Democrats. In third place, the Liberal Democrats way down from where they were at the general election. And the share, of course, drives the allocation of the seats. So there we see the Tories with 4/10 of the vote getting 4 of the seats. There we have the Labour Party getting just 1 seat, the Liberal Democrats getting 1 seat. And what's happened here over at the others? Just have a look at the UK independents list here. There it is. They've got 11% of the vote in the southwest. That gives them that 1 seat. So there it is then. There you see the profile of the seats, the share of the seats, representing the share of the vote at the top there. Now, having said that, let's just have a look at the scene over the country as a whole. This is the lead by region in the general election of 1997. Look how Labour totally dominated the country. Those represent the leads and the shares of the vote, leaving only the Tories with the largest share of the vote in East Anglia here in South East and South West regions. This is what's happened now in this European election. Look at the huge comeback by the Conservatives. Bear in mind all the time the low turnout, of course, but never mind. In terms of share of the actual votes cast, the Tories shooting up here, leading in the Midlands, leading in Yorkshire and the Humber, leading even in the Northwest, that vital region if you want to win a general election. And then the share of the vote then this time that shows the share of the vote in terms of lead of the Tories over Labour everywhere there. Right the way down here in the southwest, a huge lead in the share of the vote. A forecast lead here, we haven't had the detailed result from the southeast yet, of 26% for the Tories. Even in London, the Tories just a fraction, not 1%, but just above 0%. Here we have 19% forecast in the eastern region, the West Midlands, 2 11s in the Midlands, Wales, the Labour Party just ahead of Plaid Cymru, and even in Yorkshire and the northwest, as David was saying earlier, the Tories ahead of Labour, leaving them, Labour only really commanding in the northeast, David.
Peter, thanks very much. Well, let's go to Alexandra Palace now and join Nikki Campbell. Nikki, is there a sort of party atmosphere there? Is there a feeling of great events taking place, London stirring, or is it rather quiet?
London stirring. Well, it's beginning to stir a little bit more as we reach the hour of reckoning. And some of the Greens are beginning to stir somewhat, because an interesting story is developing here, David. They seem to be perhaps teetering on the brink of success, maybe snatching a seat. At the moment, the Liberal Democrats are on our running total on 10.7%. It's thus far a bad night for them. The Greens on 8.14, a very good night for them so far. Now, what do you reckon you will need to pick up a seat? Jean Lambert, you're number 1 in their list. You could be off to Brussels and Strasbourg.
Well, that would be very nice. You can still eat the mussels and chips there, I understand. But I think we need somewhere between about 8 and 9%. And so at the moment, we're very much borderline on that.
Yeah, so you're right. So how are you feeling? You're biting your fingernails, are you?
Yes, I am. I tend to do that anyway. But it is actually really a very scary process to go through when you're watching those results coming in and dipping and diving all over the place.
Now, you're a party that is implacably against the single currency. Do you think you've done quite well thus far because of that? What message were you getting on the doorstep?
Well, certainly the message on the doorstep was, well, are you against the single currency? Yes. Oh, right, well, you know, we might vote for you then. But I think obviously for us as well, the GMO issue, the genetically modified foods, was very big for us. There were a lot of people who were very unhappy with the government's policy on that. Kosovo as well certainly had a lot of Labour voters swinging in our direction. So there were a number of issues around, not just single currency for us.
And what about the whole idea of Europe? Because in your 1997 manifesto for the election in May of that year, you were advocating withdrawal from the European Union.
Well, what we were advocating actually was withdrawal as a final option if things didn't move. I mean, the policy has changed. We're now looking at actually reform from within. And there are some very significant changes in the Amsterdam Treaty about the environment, about the commitment to sustainable development as a goal of the European Union, which definitely needs Greens in there to make sure it happens.
Look at the big picture. I mean, core to your philosophy, as we understand it, is small is beautiful. And self-evidently, the European Union is not small.
Well, it's not so much small is beautiful as an issue about subsidiarity, which is very much the core Green philosophy, that you do things at the lowest level which is effective. And obviously for certain things like environmental protection, human rights protection, you need international cooperation, and people recognise that that's important for the Greens, and therefore sometimes they're willing to look at us
in an international context for
now,
that.
you could be quite uncomfortable partners for some of the other Greens from other countries in the European Parliament who are far less Eurosceptic than yourselves. So can you be a proper homogenous political grouping, or just a rag bag?
Certainly not a rag bag. I mean, we actually had a common manifesto as well, which wasn't just for the European Union countries, but which was actually for all the countries in which Greens are active across the whole of Europe, East and West. So there is a very strong core to that. There are areas, yes, where we disagree. All groups do that, but generally we work together very, very well. And what the Green Group has been telling us for years is that they want the British Greens in there because they lack that UK perspective about the way in which politics operates here and the way in which people think within the UK. And they desperately want us in that group, and with any luck tonight, they may get a couple of us there.
All right, Jean Lambert, we'll wait and see if you're going to be packing your bags and going off to Strasbourg or Brussels.
Yes.
Back to the studio.
The UK Independence Party are one of the other smaller parties contesting. We're predicting they're going to get 3 seats in the European Parliament. But it's interesting that in 374 of the constituencies that have been counted, the UK Independence Party, which want to pull out of Europe, were ahead of the Greens, and the Greens only beat the UKIP in 166. So they've put themselves in a fairly strong minority party position. Anyway, we go to Huntingdon and join Sarah Nelson, who has one of the UK Independence Party candidates with her.
Yes, indeed, David. It has been a very interesting night here in the Eastern region because it's the Labour Party and the UK Independence Party who are fighting for that last 8th seat. And it looks as though the UK Independence Party has won it. I'm joined by Geoffrey Titford, who is the UK Independence Party's lead candidate in this region. Geoffrey, if you do win it, what sort of a success will it be for the party?
Oh, it'll be a marvellous success. The party has only been formed for about 6 years, but they've worked enormously hard on very small funds, but with a wonderful team of people throughout the whole of the country. And this is really an achievement for everybody involved.
But the Eastern region was particularly difficult for the party to break through. You had higher hopes of the Southwest, where we have seen a gain for you tonight. So what has made you win here, do you think?
Again, it's a question of dedication by the people that have been working. We've always known that Essex has been a very Eurosceptic county, and probably on the basis of that, you know, the success will come through. But people have always said that small parties didn't stand a chance. Well, we've proved that they do stand a chance, and this has been brought about by the minor groups such as the action groups, the democracy movement, the CIB. They've all campaigned in some way for us, and together we've pulled this one off, we think.
There had been some expectation that you might have taken votes from the Conservatives. Do you think finally that that is what has happened here, or there's more Euroscepticism in the Eastern region than many people have thought?
We have taken votes right across the board. It started with our own Works Committee. You know, we had Labour in there, we had Liberals, and we are drawing from every party because we have a message which people want to hear.
Geoffrey Titford, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So that's the story really from the Eastern region. A shock win, we're thinking, for the UK Independence Party, leaving Labour on possibly only 2 seats. A very bad result indeed for Labour.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Julie, you've got a point about these smaller parties in Europe. We've seen what's happened in Britain. Is the same thing happening tonight across Europe?
What is happening is a move away from the governing parties, a move in several countries towards the Greens, not so much the anti-Europeans, but definitely a shift away from the centre-left, maybe a shift from the third way. And in particular, this is going to affect the way the Parliament and the Commission interact in the next few months. It's going to make a major difference.
Okay. I think that Nisha Pillai, who was watching the television coverage over Europe, has got some stuff on exactly this point. So let's just see if we can see that while we wait to go to Wales, where our next declaration is due. Here's Nisha Pillai.
There was jubilation in eastern Germany for the PDS, former communists who made a remarkable showing to win their first ever seats in the European Parliament. Their leader, Gregor Gysi, said they were now the 4th biggest party in Germany, and he was looking forward to winning acceptance in the whole of Germany. The final results are still some way off, but the PDS could even beat the Liberal Party, who've traditionally held the balance of power. Their success is in marked contrast to the poor showing for the ruling Red-Green coalition of Chancellor Schröder. In France, however, the Greens have been in party mood. Daniel Cohn-Bendit, who shot to fame as the student leader of 1968, became the first person to be elected an MEP in 2 countries. The Greens, he said, had attracted new voters away from the traditional left, and then he threw down a challenge to other European socialist leaders.
La vraie troisième gauche qui donnera une réponse au social-libéralisme de M. Blair et de M. Schröder.
A third left was what he offered, in contrast to the middle way in Britain and Germany.
Ce sont eux qui ont permis à notre liste de réaliser une performance remarquable compte tenu des circonstances.
At the other end of the political spectrum, the French National Front leader, Jean-Marie Le Pen, was also in feisty mood. His vote was well down because of a split in the party, but he said it was a remarkable result under the circumstances, because his party's assets had been frozen by the government. Treason in the ranks was his verdict.
Okay, well, there's how these things are being seen over Europe, but we now go to the East Midlands, where we have the declaration coming up.